ready to dive into the hidden depths of your own mind.
Ooh, sounds intense.
We're going deep today, exploring Occult Psychology by Alta J. LaDage.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What's the book all about?
Well, she makes this fascinating connection between the ancient wisdom of the Kabbalah.
The Kabbalah.
Yeah.
Like the mystical tradition.
Exactly. She connects it with the modern psychology of Carl Jung.
Wow, that's an interesting pairing. Ancient mysticism and modern psychology. How does that work?
That's what we're going to find out. It's
Yeah.
like she's bridging these two worlds that seem totally different on the surface.
Right, like they're coming from completely opposite ends of the spectrum.
But LaDage argues that they actually complement each other, offering this richer understanding of what it means to be human.
So where do we even begin with this deep dive?
Well, one of the first things that really jumped out at me was this idea of a universal drive for more.
A drive for more. Like, what do you mean by that?
It's this innate human desire to transcend our current state, to reach beyond what we already know.
Okay, I think I get you. Like striving for something bigger, something beyond ourselves.
Exactly. And LaDage argues that this drive shows up everywhere. You see it in the businessman chasing that next big deal.
Right, always striving for more success, more money, more power.
Exactly. But you also see it in the spiritual seeker meditating for hours, trying to achieve enlightenment.
So it's not just about material things, it's a deeper human impulse.
Precisely. LaDage suggests that this drive is woven into the fabric of our being, whether we express it through ambition, spirituality, or even the pursuit of pleasure.
It's all pointing to this desire for something beyond our immediate experience.
Exactly. So how do Jung and the Kabbalah play into all of this?
Well, LaDage argues that both psychology and occultism actually address this drive, just from different angles. Psychology might focus on things like self-actualization, the need to fulfill our potential.
Right, like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We all have this innate drive to become the best versions of ourselves.
Exactly. And occultism often frames this drive as a yearning to connect with the divine, to merge with something larger than ourselves.
It's like they're both trying to answer that age-old question. What is our purpose? Why are we here?
Precisely. And LaDage's work challenges the idea that these two fields have to be at odds with each other. She suggests that by bridging the gap.
We can actually gain a more complete understanding of ourselves and our place in the universe.
Okay, I'm really starting to see how this all connects, but how exactly do we build that bridge between psychology and occultism?
That's where things get really interesting. One of the key concepts LaDage explores is the power of the unconscious.
The unconscious, it's like this mysterious realm that influences our thoughts and behaviors in ways we don't even realize.
Exactly. And this is where Jung's work becomes so crucial. LaDage uses his concept of archetypes.
Archetypes. Remind me what those are again.
Jungian archetypes are like these universal primal patterns of behavior and imagery that are embedded in our collective unconscious. Think of them as characters in the play of life.
Characters in the play of life. I like that.
Right. Each archetype has its own set of motivations, desires, and influences on how the story unfolds.
So we're all influenced by these archetypal energies, even if we're not aware of them.
Exactly. And LaDage takes this a step further by using the Kabbalah's 4 worlds to map out where and how these archetypes actually operate.
Okay, now you're going to have to break that down for me. What are the 4 worlds?
Think of it as a spectrum of creation. At one end, you have pure energy and potential, which is the world of Absolute.
Pure potential, got it.
As you move along the spectrum, that energy becomes more defined, taking form first in the mental realm of Binah.
Okay, so thoughts and ideas start to solidify.
Exactly. Then it flows into the emotional realm of Yetzirah,
where our feelings and desires come into play.
And finally, it manifests in the physical world of Asiya.
The world we experience with our senses. So how do these archetypes fit into all of this?
Well, let's take the archetype of the hero, for instance. In Absolute, the hero would represent pure, unmanifested potential for courage and action.
Okay, the raw potential of the hero.
Right. Then in Binah, that potential might manifest as the idea or concept of bravery.
Interesting. So it's becoming more defined.
Exactly. And then in Yetzirah, it would become the feeling of courage welling up within us.
Wow. So by the time it reaches Asiya,
it could manifest as a courageous act in the real world.
I see. So by understanding this map of the four worlds,
We can start to see how these archetypal forces are influencing our thoughts, emotions, and actions on every level.
that's incredible. It's like we're getting a behind-the-scenes look at how our realities are created.
Exactly. But here's where things get a little tricky.
Tricky. How so?
LaDage is all about exploring the unconscious, right?
Right, that's what we've been talking about.
But she also issues a big warning about certain techniques, like active imagination.
Active imagination, what's that?
It's like consciously interacting with your unconscious through things like visualization or dialogue. It can be a powerful tool for growth, but
But there's a catch.
she stresses the importance of caution, proper grounding, even compares it to playing with fire.
Playing with fire, why so dangerous?
Well, imagine you're not just observing the unconscious anymore, you're actively engaging with it.
Okay, I can see how that could be risky if you don't know what you're doing.
Exactly. And if you're not careful, you can unleash energies that are difficult to control. She even mentions this chilling anecdote about Madame David Neal.
Who is Madame David Neal?
She was this explorer and spiritual practitioner who accidentally created what's called a thought form that caused her months of trouble.
A thought form. Like she accidentally brought something to life with her mind.
It's not quite that simple, but it highlights the potential dangers of dabbling in these practices without proper guidance. It's not just about releasing energy, it's about knowing how to direct and integrate it safely.
So it's like opening a fire hydrant. You've got all this water gushing out, but without a way to channel it.
You're just going to create a huge mess.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So how do we work with the unconscious responsibly?
that's the million-dollar question. And that's what we'll be exploring in our next deep dive. So last time, we learned off with this idea of the unconscious being like a powerful, untamed force, right?
Yeah, kind of like a wild animal. You don't just approach it without understanding its nature.
Exactly. LaDage emphasizes that it's not enough to just access the unconscious. We need to learn how to work with it constructively and responsibly.
Which makes me think about another key theme she brings up, this whole idea of the shadow self.
Right. She's not afraid to go there, is she? She dives right into those darker aspects of ourselves that we often try to avoid.
Exactly, and she challenges this idea that we need to get rid of our shadows or pretend they don't exist.
Which is what we're often taught to do, right? Just suppress those negative thoughts and emotions, pretend everything is fine.
Exactly. But LaDage argues that true wholeness comes from acknowledging and integrating those shadowy parts, not from trying to erase them.
It's like trying to walk forward while dragging this heavy weight behind you.
Right, the more you try to ignore it.
The more it holds you back.
Exactly. So how do we even begin to integrate our shadow selves?
Well, LaDage suggests that the first step is simply acknowledging those parts of ourselves that we'd rather keep hidden.
Acknowledging them. It's one thing to recognize they're there, but how do we actually work with them?
She talks about understanding where those shadow aspects come from, Often they're rooted in past experiences, traumas, or even just societal conditioning that tells us certain parts of ourselves are unacceptable.
So it's about understanding the root causes of those shadow behaviors and beliefs.
Exactly. And then instead of judging those parts or trying to banish them, it's about finding ways to work with their energy constructively.
Constructively, how do you
Okay.
mean? Like finding a positive outlet for that shadow energy.
Exactly. LaDage emphasizes that even our shadows have gifts to offer, They can make us more resilient, more creative, more compassionate even.
That's an interesting perspective. It's like reframing our relationship with those darker parts of ourselves.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that true wholeness encompasses all aspects of ourselves, both light and shadow.
Okay, that makes sense. But this whole idea of working with energy, it makes me think of another concept LaDage talks about, libido.
Right, and she's not just talking about sexual energy here, although that's definitely a part of it.
Right, it's like she's using libido in a broader sense.
Exactly. She's describing it as this vital life force that fuels everything we do, our creativity, our passions, our relationships. It's like our personal energy reserve.
It reminds me of the Eastern concept of chi, or prana, that vital life force that flows through all things.
Exactly. And LaDage actually connects libido to the Eastern concept of kundalini.
Kundalini, that's the coiled serpent energy.
Yeah, that's the one. She describes this powerful energy that lies dormant at the base of the spine.
And when that energy is awakened.
She says it can lead to incredible personal transformation. But
There's always a but, right?
Right. She's very clear that trying to manipulate this energy without proper understanding and guidance can be dangerous.
It's like playing with fire, like we talked about earlier.
Exactly. Imagine someone trying to hotwire a powerful sports car, but they have no idea what they're doing.
Right. They're more likely to blow a gasket than to get anywhere.
Exactly. So how do we approach this Kundalini energy responsibly? Where do we even begin?
Well, LaDage suggests that the most important thing is to find a qualified teacher or guide.
Right. Someone who's walked the path before, who can provide safe and effective guidance.
Exactly. She also emphasizes the importance of grounding.
Right. Staying connected to your physical body and the present moment, even while exploring these deeper realms.
No astral projecting without a safety net.
Exactly. It's about honoring both the physical and spiritual aspects of ourselves. Speaking of respecting our energy, I was fascinated by LaDage's take on dreams and visions.
What does she say about them?
She seemed to be saying they're not just random events, but like messages from our unconscious.
Messages. Trying to tell us something.
Exactly. Offering guidance, insights, warnings even. But she's also cautious about taking them too literally.
So it's not like a dream dictionary where everything has a fixed meaning.
Right. It's more about understanding their symbolic language, what they represent for us personally.
So dreaming about showing up to work naked isn't necessarily a premonition.
Probably not. Though it might be worth exploring what that dream brings up for you emotionally. Maybe it's about feeling exposed or vulnerable in your work life.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So how do we start deciphering these dream messages?
LaDage suggests keeping a dream journal, writing them down as soon as you wake up.
Right, because they fade so quickly.
Exactly. And then reflecting on them. What were the emotions you experienced in the dream? What were the recurring symbols?
It's like piecing together a puzzle, using those dream images as clues.
You've got it. LaDage suggests that by learning to interpret the language of dreams, we can gain incredible insight into our own unconscious processes.
So our dreams can actually become a source of guidance if we know how to listen.
Exactly. Now, ready for a curveball?
A curveball? What do you mean?
LaDage actually connects this whole discussion about the unconscious to crime.
Crime. I don't think I saw that one coming. How does that fit in?
It's pretty mind-blowing, actually. She suggests that understanding the unconscious can give us a new perspective on the root causes of crime.
Like why people commit crimes in the first place.
Exactly. She even questions whether our current approaches to dealing with crime, like punishment and incarceration, might actually be making things worse.
Worse? How so?
Well, she argues that locking people up without addressing the underlying psychological and emotional issues, the shadow stuff we've been talking about.
It's like sweeping dirt under the rug doesn't make it go away.
Right. It might even create a breeding ground for more darkness and dysfunction.
So what's the alternative?
LaDage suggests we need to find more compassionate and holistic ways to address crime.
Compassionate. You mean focusing on rehabilitation and healing?
Exactly. It's about addressing the root causes of the behavior, not just reacting to the symptoms.
It's like that saying, hurt people hurt people. If we want to break the cycle of violence and crime, we have to address that underlying hurt.
Precisely. LaDage even brings up those infamous suicide rocks or axe murder alleys you hear about.
Places that seem to attract tragedy over and over again.
Exactly. And she suggests that those places might hold on to the unresolved pain and trauma of what happened there. It's like this negative energy gets embedded in the environment itself.
Wow. That's a pretty intense thought.
Yeah.
So it's not just about individual shadows, but also about the collective shadow of a place, of a community.
Exactly. And it highlights the importance of addressing those deeper issues, both on a personal and societal level. Okay, let's shift gears for a moment. Another recurring theme in LaDage's work is this idea of cycles.
Cycles, like the cycles of nature.
Exactly. She talks about how everything in the universe moves in cycles, the seasons, the tides, the phases of the moon.
And we as humans are also subject to these cycles.
Exactly. We have our own internal rhythms, physical, emotional, spiritual, that ebb and flow just like the tides.
So it's not about resisting those cycles, but about learning to flow with them.
You got it. LaDage argues that by understanding these cycles, we can navigate the ups and downs of life with more grace and wisdom.
So how do we do that? How can we learn to work with those rhythms instead of feeling constantly thrown off balance?
Well, LaDage suggests paying attention to our energy levels, our moods, our motivations. When are we feeling more introspective, more outgoing?
So it's about tuning into our own internal compass, noticing those subtle shifts.
Precisely. And then, instead of trying to force things or swim upstream, we can learn to align our actions and intentions with the natural flow of energy.
It's like surfing. You wouldn't try to catch a wave when the tide is out.
Exactly. It's about working with the natural rhythms of life, not against them. LaDage even connects this idea to the Eastern concept of the tattvas.
Tattvas. Remind me what those are again.
Imagine them as 5 fundamental forces: ether, air, fire, water, and earth, each with its own unique qualities and influence. LaDage suggests these tattvas are constantly interacting and cycling, both within us and in the world around us.
So these tattvas are kind of like the building blocks of our experience, constantly shifting and changing.
Exactly. And just like understanding the phases of the moon can help a gardener know when to plant and harvest, understanding the tattvas can help us make choices that are more aligned with the flow of energy at any given time.
That's fascinating. So how do we apply this knowledge in our everyday lives?
Well, LaDage provides a lot of practical tips and exercises throughout the book, but ultimately it's about becoming more attuned to those subtle energies both within ourselves and in the world around us.
It's about finding that sweet spot where our personal will aligns with the divine will.
Beautifully said. And that brings me to another important point. LaDage emphasizes that we don't have to navigate this journey alone.
Right. She talks about the importance of finding a teacher, a mentor, a community.
Exactly. It's like having a guide when you're exploring a new and unfamiliar territory. They've been there before, they know the terrain, and they can help you avoid those potential pitfalls.
It's like having a Sherpa guide you through the Himalayas.
Exactly. But just like finding a therapist or a doctor you trust, finding the right spiritual teacher or mentor is a deeply personal process.
It's about finding someone who resonates with your energy, who embodies the qualities you're seeking to cultivate within yourself.
Exactly. And LaDage reminds us that there are a lot of unqualified teachers out there, people who might not have your best interests at heart.
So how do we tell the difference between the real deal and someone who's just trying to make a quick buck?
Discernment is key. LaDage emphasizes the importance of listening to your intuition, doing your research, and not being afraid to ask questions. If something feels off, trust your gut.
So it's about approaching this whole spiritual path with a healthy dose of skepticism.
Exactly. And remember, true teachers don't want you to become dependent on them. They want to empower you to find your own way, to become your own guru.
Okay, that makes sense. But what about those people who claim to have all the answers, who promise quick and easy enlightenment?
LaDage is very clear about this. There are no shortcuts on the spiritual path.
So no magic pills or secret mantras.
Nope. LaDage is a big proponent of doing the inner work, of facing our shadows, integrating our experiences, and cultivating a deep connection to our own inner wisdom.
And that takes time, dedication, and a willingness to confront those uncomfortable truths about ourselves.
Precisely. And speaking of uncomfortable truths, LaDage doesn't shy away from talking about the potential pitfalls on the spiritual path.
Pitfalls? Like what?
Well, she warns against getting caught up in esoteric practices or relying on substances as a shortcut to spiritual awakening.
So just because something is labeled spiritual doesn't mean it's automatically beneficial.
Exactly. LaDage emphasizes the importance of discernment, of not just blindly following anyone or anything, but really listening to your own inner guidance and intuition.
It's like anything else in life, a little healthy skepticism and a lot of self-awareness can go a long way.
Exactly. And when it comes to substances, LaDage reminds us that while they can offer glimpses into altered states of consciousness,
They're not a substitute for the real work.
right, they're more like a scenic detour. It might be fun for a while, but it won't necessarily get you where you need to go.
So true and lasting transformation comes from the inside out.
Exactly. It's about doing the inner work, confronting those shadow aspects, integrating our experiences, and cultivating a deep connection to our own inner wisdom.
Okay, so we've talked about the importance of doing the work, but how do we even begin to understand where we are on this journey of self-discovery?
That's where things get really interesting. LaDage introduces this concept of the 3 crossings.
The 3 crossings, what are those?
Think of them as these major transitions in consciousness, like rites of passage on the spiritual path.
Okay, so these crossings mark significant shifts in our awareness.
Exactly. LaDage connects them to the Kabbalistic tree of life, which she uses as a map of consciousness, outlining different stages of spiritual evolution.
The tree of life. That
Yeah.
sounds a bit complex.
It is a complex system, but for the sake of our deep dive today, think of it like this. Each crossing represents a level up in awareness and understanding.
Okay, so like leveling up in a video game.
Exactly. But instead of gaining new weapons or powers, we're gaining new levels of awareness and insight into ourselves and the nature of reality.
I like that analogy. But I'm guessing these level ups aren't always easy.
You got it. LaDage emphasizes that these crossings aren't just intellectual concepts, they're lived experiences. They often involve emotional breakthroughs, shifts in perspective, and even what she calls psychic explosions.
Psychic explosions, that sounds kind of intense.
They can be. Imagine a pressure cooker releasing all its steam at once. That's kind of what it can feel like as we break through old patterns, limiting beliefs, and outdated ways of being.
So it's not always a smooth and comfortable process.
Not at all. LaDage is very clear that these transformations can be messy, challenging, and even painful at times, but she also emphasizes that they're ultimately necessary for our growth.
No pain, no gain, right?
Exactly. But she also reminds us that we don't have to go through these transitions alone. Seeking out support from teachers, guides, mentors, or communities can be incredibly valuable.
It's like having a midwife to support you through labor and delivery.
Perfect analogy. A midwife can't give birth for you, but they can provide support, guidance, and make sure everything unfolds as safely as possible.
Exactly. So what are these three crossings all about? What kind of transformations are we talking about here?
Well, each crossing represents a significant shift in our relationship to the ego, the unconscious, and the divine. The first crossing.
The first level up.
Exactly. It's often associated with a move away from a purely ego-driven existence toward a greater awareness of the unconscious.
So it's like waking up to the fact that there's more to us than meets the eye.
Precisely. It's realizing that what we perceive as our conscious self is just the tip of the iceberg. There's this vast, mostly hidden realm influencing our thoughts, emotions, and behaviors.
Okay, so what about the second crossing?
The second crossing is where things get really interesting. It's often described as a journey of integration. Remember all that shadow work we talked about?
Oh, yeah. Facing those darker aspects of ourselves.
Exactly. The second crossing is all about bringing those shadow contents into the light of awareness, learning how to work with them constructively.
That sounds both challenging and terrifying.
It can be. LaDage is honest about the difficulties involved in this deep inner work, but she also emphasizes that it's through those challenges that we experience the greatest growth and transformation.
It's like that Carl Jung quote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious."
Exactly. True spirituality isn't about escaping those shadow parts of ourselves, but learning to dance with them, integrating them into the tapestry of our being.
Okay, so if the second crossing is about integrating the shadow, what about the third crossing? What's the final level up look like?
That's where things get really mysterious. LaDage doesn't reveal too much about it in the book.
Why not?
She describes it as a transition so profound, so beyond the realm of ordinary human experience, that it's difficult to even articulate.
So it's like trying to explain color to someone who's been blind since birth.
Exactly. She suggests that even attempting to describe this level of consciousness can be dangerous, potentially leading to psychological or even physical harm.
Wow, okay. So it's a bit of a mystery then.
It is. But LaDage does offer some clues. She refers to this final crossing as the Great Abyss.
The Great Abyss. That sounds ominous.
It's not about something to be feared, though. She describes it as a complete transcendence of duality.
Duality, like moving beyond the opposite.
Exactly. It's about going beyond good and bad, light and dark, even life and death. It's about merging with the ultimate source of creation.
Wow, that's a pretty mind-blowing concept to wrap our heads around.
It is. But even if we can't fully grasp it intellectually, LaDage suggests that simply having an awareness of this ultimate destination can inspire us on our journey.
You know, it's funny, after our last deep dive, I kept thinking about the third crossing and that whole idea of transcending duality.
It's definitely one of those concepts that kind of sticks with you, isn't it?
It is, but it also got me thinking about how challenging it can be to even wrap our heads around those more mystical concepts, let alone actually experience them.
Right, like how do we bridge that gap between intellectual understanding and lived experience?
Exactly. And it made me appreciate how grounded LaDage's approach is. She's not just throwing out these abstract ideas, she's offering practical tools and techniques for actually integrating these insights into our daily lives.
Right, she's all about making those connections between the mystical and the mundane, showing how these ancient wisdom traditions can actually be relevant to our modern lives.
Exactly. Like that analogy she uses of the deep-sea diver. She compares exploring the unconscious to diving into the depths of the ocean. Oh yeah, I remember that. It takes preparation, the right equipment, and a healthy respect for the potential dangers.
Precisely. You wouldn't just jump into the ocean without knowing how to swim or without the proper gear,
Oh,
right?
that would be suicide.
Exactly. And LaDage is saying that we need to approach the unconscious with that same level of respect and preparation.
Otherwise, we risk getting in over our heads.
Exactly. We might encounter forces that we're not yet equipped to handle, or we might even get lost in the depths.
So what kind of preparation are we talking about here? What are some of the essential tools for navigating the unconscious safely and effectively?
Well, LaDage talks a lot about the importance of grounding.
Grounding, like staying connected to our physical bodies and the present moment.
Exactly. It's easy to get swept away by those big, abstract ideas, especially when we're exploring the realms of the unconscious and the mystical.
Right. It's like our minds can easily wander off into those realms while our bodies are still stuck here in the material world.
Exactly. So
Sure.
LaDage emphasizes practices like meditation, yoga, spending time in nature, anything that helps us reconnect to our bodies and to the present moment.
So grounding is like the anchor that keeps us from floating off into the astral plane.
Exactly. And another essential tool is discernment.
Discernment. Remind me what that means again.
It's about not just blindly accepting everything we read or hear, but really learning to listen to our own inner guidance, our own intuition.
So not just following the crowd, but figuring out what resonates as true for us personally.
Exactly. LaDage emphasizes that we all have our own unique path to walk, our own lessons to learn. What works for one person might not work for another.
Right. One person's spiritual guru might be another person's scam artist.
Exactly. So it's about developing that inner compass, that ability to discern between what's true and authentic for us and what might be misleading or even harmful.
Okay, so grounding and discernment are key. What else?
Another important tool LaDage talks about is working with a qualified guide.
Right, like finding a teacher or mentor who can offer support and guidance on the journey.
Exactly. And she emphasizes that this is especially important when we're dealing with the more challenging aspects of the path, like confronting our shadow selves or navigating those big transitions in consciousness.
Because let's face it, those shadow parts of ourselves can be pretty scary, right?
Yeah.
It's not always easy to face those darker aspects of our being.
Absolutely. And that's why having a guide who's been there before, who can hold space for us and offer compassionate guidance, can be invaluable.
So how do we even begin to find the right guide?
LaDage suggests that we approach it like we would any other important relationship. Trust your intuition, do your research, and don't be afraid to ask questions.
And be wary of anyone who claims to have all the answers or promises quick and easy enlightenment.
Exactly. True teachers don't want you to become dependent on them. They want to empower you to find your own way. So, grounding, discernment, qualified guidance. These are just a few of the essential tools that LaDage offers for navigating the spiritual path.
It's like she's providing us with a map and a compass for exploring this vast and often uncharted territory of the human psyche.
Exactly. And while there are no guarantees on this journey, LaDage's work reminds us that we're not alone. We are all part of this vast and mysterious universe, constantly evolving and unfolding. And within each of us lies the potential for incredible growth, transformation, and awakening.
That's a beautiful thought to end on.
It is, isn't it? Well, this has been an incredible deep dive into occult psychology. We've covered a lot of ground today, exploring everything from the power of the unconscious to the importance of integrating our shadow selves.
And we've just scratched the surface. There's so much more to explore within the pages of this book.
Absolutely. LaDage's work is the kind that invites multiple readings and deep contemplation. So, to our listeners, if you're intrigued by what you've heard today, we highly recommend checking out occult psychology for yourself.
And as always, we'd love to hear your thoughts and reflections on this episode. What resonated most deeply with you? What questions or insights came up for you?
Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below or reach out to us on social media. And until next time, keep exploring.